Okay. So it seems like we are already done our first two complementary session from last week, and I will start. So basically, I will start sharing the outline first, and then we'll discuss that where we'll go from this point. Let me check the outline. Okay. So I will share this outline also with the group. So another important thing, so this outline will be our main source of many things, means homework and also tracking. And this outline will be visible for everybody who is actually our students. And I will update after each meeting, the instructor name, the date, and here there will be another piece, the meeting recordings. So you will see some of these changes every end of this every class. And so you don't have to ask to instructor every time, okay, can you share the meeting recording? Or you don't have to worry about tracking down all the way back for a few days back and check the meeting recording. So every time you access this document, you will have the meeting recording next to the date. So that will be actually reducing a lot of conflicts. So this is one of these. And from today, I will strictly follow this course outline, because this course outline was actually created for our 4 months program, right? So if I don't follow this outline properly, it will be tough to maintain and tracking the topics that we are covering. And at the same time, all of you will have better understanding that, okay, on this date, what exactly we covered. So this will also actually help you to track all the topics, and in the future topics that is coming next week or after 3 days. And at the same time, as I said, you will have meeting recordings with each day. So you will not have any confusion. So if you miss for any emergencies, you can just access this document and check this meeting recording and review this meeting recording. And if you have any question, you can ask next class or through our group chat. And if you don't have this course outline, I will share this link or this course outline with you all. So, and another one, so if there's any question, I think Joel is back, right?
Yeah. Okay. So this course outline, let's do one thing. We can share only Google on view only for all of us, like all of the students. And this is where we can share the links to the video also, so they can always go back if they need to. Okay, so if you want to finish up, I'll get started after this.
Yes. Okay. So Joel, one more quick question, actually not quick. So before you start, from either today or next Saturday, we'll actually implement our regular standard of the class formatting. So that means, also another thing actually I want to show you. So going forward, if we have any homework, right? Sometimes we will have online based homework. Sometimes we will have just document based. Like for example, you will be just writing the answer and send us the quiz or send us the assignment. So you see that these 4 email ID, every time you send any homework or any assignment, just copy and paste all of these 4 email IDs actually. So to list. So Enambai, the first one, who will be mostly responsible and will be grading all of your homeworks. But sometimes if he's out, maybe one of us will be grading, one of us will be giving you answer or response you back. So I will share all of this for email ID in the WhatsApp chat also, so that every time you share any documents, make sure that you are copying this for email ID. And also, this is our regular class format. We'll actually start daily stand-up maybe from Saturday, not today because today is little short class. And from Saturday, this will be the meeting standard format. For example, you will start with topic, and then there'll be a daily stand-up, and then topic overview, and then you'll see here, right? And end of the class, you will see if there is any homework. For example, end of the class, there will be homework details here. So if you miss any homework, so that when is due, every details will be here also. So we'll try to just make them ready for all of you guys, so that you are not missing anything. You don't have to ask every time if you miss anything. And at the same time, it will help you to track everything on time, when is due, and if you are actually, we are waiting from you for any documents or anything. Yeah, that's that thing. So all of this document actually I'll be sharing with you guys end of this class today. And one more last request, as Joel said, we will be using Gmail, like Google Drive, right? So if you don't have a Gmail account or Gmail ID, please create one with your first name and last name, something like professional style. That email you will be using maybe for your resume after 4 months. So Gmail ID is a mandatory for now to access this document. Thank you. So Julva, you want to start?
Yep, I'll go ahead and start. Thank you, Shantabhai. Hopefully you guys heard him, and we're gonna do a little bit more structured starting from the next class. Again, today still giving you guys overview of testing, as well as there are some slides that we still have to go over. So hopefully we finish the slides today. These slides are very, very important for a few reasons. One is that it gives you some knowledge before we dive into the actual material. And if we do end up diving in without this prior knowledge, it may be a bit harder for you to grasp everything. So it's okay to take some time and just going over things that are important. We're gonna be more specific in upcoming class. So if you, the last two classes, if you didn't understand everything properly, we're gonna go more detailed and more specific as we're following the syllabus more closely. But again, keep in mind, these 3 classes, I believe 3 or 4 classes that we're doing onto these slides is kind of giving you overall bird eye view, right? So just the full overview of QA in general, how your testing career will be, as well as like what are some of the terms and words that you should know, and just getting familiar with the whole process. Well, there are a few processes that we'll be talking about. I think we did talk about SDLC and STLC last time. So let's start with that first for today. And then I'll try to complete today's agenda, so that way next class we are on a good format. Since the class is very small, we're gonna do stand-up meetings for sure. Stand-up meetings, again, what you did yesterday, what you're doing today, and if you have any blocker. So that means since the last class, what have you done? How many hours have you spent on studying? And if you have any blocker at all. So we do want to help you when you feel like you didn't understand something, you need extra help. We will set up some time and go over, but we need to know that first, right? We need to know if you actually having any sort of difficulties. All right, let me start recording first, and then okay.
I already
see.
started
Oh,
recording.
you started? Okay. Okay, good. All right. So you guys can see my screen. So today's basically, okay, so let's review for the last class for a minute before we go into this one. You guys remember the stages that belongs to SDLC and SDLC, some of the steps, some of the process. Anybody would remember the first one on SDLC?
Requirement gathering.
SDLC. So the first thing is requirement gathering. And then second thing is design. 3 is code. 4 is testing, which is QA, right? So test. 5 is gonna be a release. And 6 is maintenance. So in these 5 stages, you already know where you belong. And you also know what are the process for the SDLC. So we'll go a little bit more deeper, but remember SDLC and STLC is something that going to be your backbone, and you absolutely shouldn't have any doubt about those. If you do, then you let us know and we'll try to break it down more, try to explain a little bit more. If we have to do additional classes on both SDLC and STLC, we're going to do it because this is very, very important before we even get to the next classes. All right, so let me just start the slide. So customer's requirement is the first one, right? So the software development team must determine what the customer wants, right? So these are some way to get an idea what the customer actually wants, right? So, and this may be true for some methodology in software development, but also there are other methodology like waterfall, the customer requirement already collected ahead of time. So at the time of doing development, the whole team, they don't have to worry about requirements or customer requirements at all because it was collected ahead of time. And it is pretty solid because they already went through the phases where the requirement was gathered. It was basically approved and it was reviewed multiple times. So there is always going to be pros and cons between methodology in SDLC, and we're going to go about 2 different methodology that will be used and that you should know. And there are obviously more than 2. So how can you do this? Number 1, guess, it's not even a question. So collect details information from survey. That's another one. Get feedback from a previous version of software. Read reviews in magazine. Get information about competition. Other ways, and collect data is used to guide the specification effort. So these are some way that a company can actually get a requirement. So guess, it could be like, okay, what can a user really get benefited, which feature or functionality that we should create in our application that will let the user do their work more efficiently, right? So they may do some guessing, but then they will do educated guess. It's not going to be like, well, let's just go ahead and spend a lot of money on this feature. Collect details from surveys. So they may send user surveys. So if I'm sure you have seen those surveys, if you're using an application, all of a sudden it says, oh, do you have a couple of minutes to go over? What do you like about our softwares and what do you dislike and all of that, right? So now if you see a survey and you see that this specific part of the application is being disliked by 90% of the user who actually did the survey, then you may want to do something about that. So that could be another trigger where the requirement can generate. Get feedback from previous version of the software. So now if you're building a new software, looking at the existing software, so it could be using modern technology, it could be actually enhancing the experience that current customers is getting using the previous software. You can also get the feedback from there and see really what some changes or what are some struggles that the customer had when they were using this application and how can we make it better. read the review in magazines. And again, like this is just out there, but they can also read the review, not only magazines, but there are Google reviews, there are app reviews, if that is an iOS or Android app. And there could be multiple other locations that they can go and say, okay, wait a minute, our application can benefit from these changes. Get information from the competition. So like, for example, Chase Bank wants to develop an iOS app. They can certainly look at the iOS app of Bank of America and see really how they handle some of the features and what is the user experience on that application, which really helps them to say, okay, we're going to implement similar feature, but that is not copycatting, right? They're not copying anything. They're just looking at it for reference, or they're just looking at it to see how they implemented a specific feature. And then obviously there could be other ways. It could be the customer service head, or maybe the director of the company who heard a lot about different features throughout the whole company. Maybe he went around and asked employees what are some things that they need to change or they can change, and that could be some other ways that you can collect those data. It could be also user traffic, like looking at the user behavior within the application, see where the user spends the most time, and also what are the heavy features that the users are using to say, okay, we're going to make those changes. So remember, guys, requirement just doesn't come from somebody who's just going to make a business decision. It has to make sense. It has to make sense based on ROI. What will be the return on investment if we go ahead, the whole team, to spend maybe 2 or 3 weeks on building a specific feature in an application? So it's these business decisions comes really from it's all about generating revenue and money. So if you happen to become a QA, you do have the power to suggest. So I would say, before you go out there and say, no, this feature is horrible, it's not gonna really, I don't like it, I think this is like really, doesn't look good, whatever is the case, before you say all of that stuff, just think about a little bit, understand from the user's perspective, why would they need it, and why would someone actually pay to use that feature? Because it might be something that is coming from the user itself. So you don't want to just quickly throw out the idea, you want to test it, and then you can suggest and say, hey, I do have few suggestions, I feel like this is something that Bank of America is doing better than us, but this is how they did it, So few app development, at least in my career, where I felt like app developers, they were just getting the work done and not doing the best possible thing for the user. So I would just pull it out and say, okay, I'm in this app and it does this. Can we do it something like that? And then the developer goes, okay, this is going to be more complex, but who cares, right? I don't care about the complexity. I care about the user friendliness. I don't care about how user will feel. So then I would bring it up to the rest of the team and see really if we want to make that kind of changes. So it couldn't really also come from requirement, can come from you yourself, because you are also an end user, because before a user uses the application, you're the bottleneck, right? You're the person who's going to filter out any bugs. So you have the ability to make that kind of suggestion as well. Okay, so the next one, specification. The specification takes data from the customer's requirement and other sources, and this is very similar. So I would say software specification, if it's technical specification, whatever is the case, functional specification, they are all pretty much same. So now this specification is functional requirement or non-functional. Non-functional includes look and feel, how it looks like, color, and all that stuff, and different formatting as well. So this essentially is the same thing as the user requirement. Schedules is basically, the goals of scheduling are to know what work need to be completed. So it's all about efficiency, guys. So when you work in a team, it's never going to be like, oh, I like this one and we're going to get it done, or this is easy, so we're going to get this one done first. No, it's all about what can we push it out the door today that will generate money and revenue, right? So even your work, you'll have to prioritize. You'll have to take a step back and say, okay, which is my priority now? What should be going out there today? So imagine you have 4 tasks assigned to you and you see the priority clearly. One is high, medium, low, whatever is the case, then you'll have to go based off of the priority. Now, if you don't know the priority, you can ask. You can also see which features is being released first and then work on that. So we as a Q engineers, we are going to be also very efficient with what we need to do and how we do it, right? It's just all about priority. This is actually true for any jobs that you're going to be doing out there. It doesn't have to be QA. How much work is left? When will the work will be finished? Who will finish each task and other measurement? So these are a few things that project managers will do. So we're basically briefly going over this slide. So let's go into the project roadmap. So this might be, this is a project roadmap, and this is something that I just take it from Google to give you guys an idea about how it looks like. So imagine like the dates. So this could be like year 1, year 2, and year 3, and these are the features and when they should be done. So this could be part of this could be like June or something, right? A month. And this is where you are today. So all of them are green. Seems like things are moving forward as expected, right? Things are being done. So these project roadmap includes a tracking, some way to track to say, okay, which features is being done and being added to the application, and people are and it's already being released. So different way to color code, but you will see that in your team these are different project roadmaps to kind of help you and your team to understand what coming next, what is being released next, and so on, right? So this is again like to have a bird eye view to see what's really happening for the year 5, year 6, whatever is the case for your team. But again, don't take this as like I would say as is. This is just a sample roadmap, and your company can have really complex ones as well. So we can Google some of these and how it looks like later on. All right, so design. So before coding, again, we're just going and breaking down a little bit more into the SDLC. So requirement is gathered, specification is done. Before coding began, a non-trivial software project, sets of design documents that are created to serve as a blueprint, right? So as you can see right here, again, this design is being created. So if it's an iOS app, they're gonna just create those in Photoshops, and then it'll look and feel like an actual application, but it is non-functional, right? So it doesn't do anything, but it will look like an actual application. They will break it down where things should be, how things should be. And then from there, they will also have architecture, software architecture, like how these components are connected, the inner mechanism, what's happening behind the scene, data flow, where the data is coming from. And again, why these are important, because when you do database testing, when you do backend testing, you might want to know where the data is coming from, which table to go, and so on. So you got the flow chart, you got the also UX design. So again, what the UX designers do, and this is probably true for most of the companies, is that they design the buttons, they design the part of the software, like for example, icons, anything they need in the software ahead of time. And developers, they will use those resources, okay? They don't, as a coder, as a developer, they don't come up with the design, right? Somebody had to create, like, for example, this icon that you're seeing right here. Somebody had to actually design it first. And then this design gets approved. So they do have their own process of building the whole design for the entire application. And what happens is that the buttons or even a text field, these will be reused. So they don't have to create buttons for the entire application. They create one that will basically will be uniform with the rest of it, right? So the buttons will look the same throughout the whole applications, unless there is some exception. And same goes for any other icons that you're seeing in this example right here, right? So they will do it based on the requirement, and then they will make sure that it gets approved. The design needs to get approved because the designer have the freedom to design it in a way that the company wants. But again, they need to make sure that it is visually there so that the higher ups. It could be project manager, and also the product owner who is going to look at it and say, okay, this is exactly what I want. And then for us as a QA, we're going to look at those design and say, okay, it doesn't match. It doesn't match with what we're seeing. It doesn't match with the design document. So we're going to fail it, right? We have the ability to fail or pass. Okay, so we're not going to just wait around. Something fails, you put it to the side and you move on and let them fix it. So that way you can get back to that specific story and fix and go ahead and retest, right? We don't fix anything, guys. Then we have coding. Source code is basically the ultimate specification of the software. Code is king. And there could be any programming language they're choosing. I would say companies make decision on coding, or at least the languages that they choose, based on the tools and based on what they're going to use, what is the architecture is going to look like, and then they will do the hiring and see if they have developers who's more familiar with which language, right? So they will try to choose the one that everybody is familiar with, and that happens at the architecture level. So somebody like a application architect who's going to decide who's going to be hired for the team, because again, he will make sure that he hires people that has the knowledge of the language that he chose in the very beginning. Okay, and so now let's talk about some of the roles and responsibilities, guys, because this is, you need to have a little bit of understanding. I'm sure some of you guys already know what these roles are. So first of all, project managers, what they do. So can you have more than one project manager in your team? Possibly, or possibly not. Sometimes project managers, they work on more than just one project. So you may have one project manager dealing with 5 different projects, right? So what they do is they write product specification, manage the schedule, and they also do critical decision trade-off. So if somebody gets fired, somebody's hiring, whatever is the case, based on the needs, they need 2 more QAs, then the project manager will approve and things like that. The project manager also have access to the budget, so he knows how much money he has to spend, so he can think about either additional resources, hiring, or any sort of tools that he needs to pay for, right? So project manager will closely monitor his budget to make sure that he's doing that. Then we have software architect. So software architect is to design the software and work closely with programmers. So initially he's the one who's going to, so this is how we want to build our software. He will lay out all the technical, ways to be able to build the software, and he will then instruct the programmers, which is developers, to write the code. He will also give them instruction on how to write code, what are the standards they should follow. And if any given time they have question, they will go back to the architect to say, okay, we need infrastructure, or we need certain items in order to be able to continue to write code. The next coworker that you will have is programmer, developer, or coder. They write code, they create features, functionalities, and they also fix bugs. So that could be, that person is going to be somebody who you will work very closely. You find a bug, obviously you'll ask him to first confirm to make sure that that is in fact a bug. And if that is the case, you create a bug report. After you create the bug report, you will fix it. Once the fix is done, then you will retest it, and then you will move on with the next, user stories or next requirement or specification that you'll be working with. Testers, that's who you are. Quality assurance, so you have many titles, guys. Again, depending on which company you're getting hired, the title can vary. So tester, sometimes they say tester simply, but it's quality assurance engineer, QA. Mostly they're gonna say QA engineer, right? Mostly, because we're gonna giving you guys training on coding, so you'll know how to write code and you'll know how to write automation. So you will be a QA engineer. But if you are out there looking for a job and somebody hire you as a tester, you might get, tester. So it's really, really depending on what kind of position you jump into to get the right title. So our job, and regardless of the title, right, our job is to find bugs, document bugs, and track progress of open bugs. That is like the primary job, but then how do we even do that? We have to be able to follow our STLC. How many people remember that from last class? Anybody remember STLC?
Software test lifecycle.
Okay, so that is the definition, right? But what does it include?
The whole process to build the app from the scratch.
STLC is the process of building the whole application from scratch. STLC, somebody just mentioned that it's a software testing lifecycle, so not SDLC. So just keep, just be careful. It's a very, sounds the same, right? SDLC and STLC sounds very same. Okay.
Is it, so I don't know. Can I try?
Yeah, go ahead.
So is it like first we're gonna test a test plan, then test design, environmental setup. Those are the thing is STLC, right?
Yes, but well, you mentioned a few things, right? But it has to have it has an order, right? Because again, that is the process that we follow as a tester. So that'll be our backbone. So we're gonna learn that a little bit more so that we can remember. We all have to remember that. So we're gonna go a few more times because that is your backbone, right? That is your bread and butter, right? Because that's what you follow in order to finish your work. And that's what will help you ultimately find a bug, document a bug, and track progress of the bug. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, but just think about it. Last class we just went over. Okay, technical writer. Technical writer is basically, think about BA, right? Somebody who writes manuals, somebody who actually documents everything, writes the writes the specification. They can further clarify what we need. And then we have configuration managers. So these last two positions have modern name. Again, technical writers is a BA. Configuration managers or builders are basically DevOps, right? So their job is to make sure that everything is done and everything is on a server running, application is running healthy, they monitor servers and all of that stuff, right? So we'll work with them as well. So all of the team members here, we're going to be working with them very closely. Now the project manager is somebody who you're going to probably have meeting once a month because he wants to know the progress, he wants to know if you have any concern, he wants to know how you feel. So he may just ask questions like, is everything okay, do you need anything? And again, this meeting can also be done by your manager, QA manager. So QA manager may take over. So it really depends case by case. If you don't have a QA manager, then project manager is going to be somebody who's going to do that meeting, but that's called one-on-one. So every week you have one-on-one meeting where you get to raise your voice and it will be heard by your manager. So if anybody making you feel uncomfortable, any concerns, that's where you go and basically raise. Now there is a question about the project manager, like what kind of background do you need? Is that the question? So like developer's background or QA background. So it really doesn't matter as a project manager. So you can actually start off a QA, do few years, and after that you become a BA, for example, and you do another few years, then become a product owner. And at that point, you are 100% qualified to be a project manager. Some people can go directly to project management as long as you have a PMP. So if you work for 5 years plus, then you can go and get a license and then become a project manager. But if you go from if you basically go from QA to BA to product owner and then project manager, you'll probably be the best project manager you can be, right? So again, there is a lot of room for growth. I've seen people becoming a developer right after becoming a QA. So 6 months later, they become a developer. I've seen people becoming a BA. I've also seen people becoming a Scrum Master. So it really, depends on who is your manager, most recent manager, and how much relationship you have with that person. Because if you tell him like, hey, I would really like to try out this new position that you have open, and then he's going to say, oh no, I can't lose you here, I need you to do QA. So obviously that's where you're going to be stuck. But if you have a manager who has an open mind, then he's going to say, okay, fine, you can take that BA position. I'll hire somebody QA. I want you to grow, right? I want you to move up and things like that. Or he might just say, well, you know, if that is your passion, then that's fine. You can go on the BA side and I will hire somebody to replace your position. So it really, really depends on the managers, because sometimes managers are selfish, where they just want to keep you there because they don't want projects to be delayed, right? They want you to, they'll probably think like, oh, we just spent like 3, 4, 5 months, and now that you're fully up to speed, you want to move on to another position. So maybe after a couple of years, if you ask that, it will be a very different response. So then he'll say, okay, fine, you've been here for a while. Let's try another position now. So you can move around within the company, and also make some progress on your career. But once you become a QA, the first QA job, honestly, like even for me, from my, you know, personal experience, I went and work on the DevOps side. I went and work on the you know, development side as well. I was a director, but I just feel like QA is the right position because it's just something that, you know, people get used to. But maybe you are different. Maybe you will like something other than just QA. So everybody has their personal preference, whatever you like. The idea is that do what you like, and then I would say at least give yourself 6 months in this course so that way you can like this position as well. Okay, so let's go into the next one. So make sure you remember who is who, because this way you don't have to be very confused about the team. Now the whole all of these position here and all of these coworkers makes up a team, right? So just think like a soccer team where everybody has a different role, and so is this, right? So everybody will have a different role, but everybody has a common goal. Yes, everybody follow a common goal. The common goal is to push the application out the door so people can use it, and therefore they can pay for it, and then company can make their money. All right, the next one, software development lifecycle. So we covered it, and I knew this slide is coming, so I wanted to make sure that, you know, in this case, we can talk about 2 different methodologies, and maybe go really briefly because we have actually a separate class just to talk about Agile and Waterfall. So I'm gonna try to go as brief as I can, and then we go from there. So SDLC, software development lifecycle, which is basically, if you think about it, the definition of it is whatever you need from start to end, whatever the phases or steps, right, that you have to go through from beginning to end, includes in SDLC. So first is requirement. You have to have requirement before you can even think about design, because you hire designers and you don't tell them anything. They can't really do anything at all, right? They're not the one who's going to make a decision on building the product. They're just there to design. So you have to tell them. So now, again, you means doesn't mean like, you know, QA, but I'm just saying a company. Then we have designers. Design needs to be done based on the requirement. After that, implementation is just coding. Verification is basically just testing, and then maintenance. So notice like the terms and the steps have a different name here. I want you to get used to that. It could be multiple meanings. So if I say verification or testing is the same thing, guys. Implementation means you're actually now looking at the documents and creating something. So that's coding. And maintenance stays same. And then we have design. Design and requirements stay same. So just keep in mind there is a different way to express different type of you know, ideas. So just but then the behind the scene is the same thing. We have waterfall and agile. These are the 2 methodologies, the SDLC, that we can use, and there are more, right? So there is fish model, there is bee model, there is iterative waterfall, and so on, right? So waterfall, I'll explain first, right? And then we go from waterfall to agile. So in waterfall, what happens is that, and this is mainly for like government projects and stuff. So first thing is this, right? You get the requirement, but you have to make sure that you have 100% done, okay? So you have 100% requirement gathered and you know exactly what you want, okay? So how long this takes? So remember, like, let's say, guys, you're building a Facebook, let's say, right? Facebook, for the next 10 minutes, pretend Facebook doesn't exist. You guys came up with the idea here. All of you guys are stakeholders, meaning all of you guys have this idea and you guys want to implement. You guys hired the team. So now, all of you guys wrote the requirement, right? So how long do you think is going to take to write that requirement? Give me an estimate for all of you guys here. Somebody works on the chat, somebody works on the messaging, posting, status and uploading pictures, whatever is the case, creating login features, sign up. So you guys wrote all of that. How long do you think it might take? You guys agree to a specific number? How many months, maybe? How many years? Whatever is the case, right?
2 months.
4 months. You said, right? So that's 4 months. Okay. Everybody agrees, or you want to change before we move on to the next? Everybody agrees. Thumbs up. Guys, don't be afraid of
Sounds about right.
speaking up. Okay. So let's say you guys work day and night 4 months. 4 months is not enough, to be honest, but like I said, you guys, let's say, pretend that you guys worked day and night. And you guys spent 4 months to build the requirement. You have the requirement ready. Now you said, okay, let's go hire the designers. And let's say you guys are being cheap and say, okay, the requirement is done, our job is done, let's build the designer. And you just hired a designer. You guys hired designers right after the requirement is built, and not trying to do everything same time because you want to save money. So now designers needs to finish 100% before you can go to the next stage, right? So now, how long do you think designer will be estimating? If it takes just to gather the document 4 months, implementing design may take a little bit more, don't you think? So give me a
I'd
month,
say
yeah.
Design would probably be anywhere between 9 to 12 months.
Okay, so that's design. Okay, let's be more, let's say these guys, you guys hired a little bit more people, like instead of like hiring 2, you hired double, right? So then let's agree to 6 months, right? Let's do 6 months. The reason why is like, I don't want to extend the project. So let's say Facebook, right? Because you want to get things out of the door sooner so that way people can use, therefore you can have all the views and stuff. Imagine MySpace is running right now and you want to do the Facebook, right? So you already spent 10 months and no product is out the door. Okay, so no revenue, let alone no feedback from the user, right? So implementation. So if design takes 6 months, coding, right? How long do you think coding is going to take? And it has to be done 100%. Okay,
Another 6 months.
so let's say again you hired extra developers, so another 6 months. Testing. Now that's your department, guys. Come on. So you can give me a good estimate for testing. If developers take 6 months to just create the application, how long do you think testers will take?
Around like 4 months.
That's not enough unless you hire 3 times
8
the
months.
amount of.
8 to 10, maybe to a year.
Yeah, if you do 1-to-1 ratio, so if you hire like 20 developers, then and you hire 20 QA, then maybe we're gonna be as close as 6 months. But I think 8 months is like a very reasonable, because it's a lot of things that you have to test, right? It's not just think about all the possible scenarios you can come up with, you know? Okay, so verification is done after the 8 months. So that's already 2 years, right? That's already 2 years, guys. So assuming you still have some money left, now you guys are ready to release. I think your release is happening somewhere here, and you just released it. There could be many challenging things that can take place, right? So assuming, like, let's say verification is done, there are some back and forth because after verification you found a lot of bugs, maybe another 2 additional months just for fixing bugs, right? So now think about it. You got 2 years and 2 months. That's basically 26 months. In that 26 months, what could happen? Right? Let's say all of you guys sold
In
your
the
houses.
prior steps,
Same,
you
like,
didn't get 100% of the requirements finished,
Okay.
or someone
Sorry.
misses.
But you can't continue without doing 100% on each step.
Yeah, you can't, right? It has to be 100% approved and everything. Make sure that it looks good, and then you move on. So let's say, okay, let's talk about, like, okay, project was successful. You guys did everything, all the way verification was done, and you guys just released it. There could be few things that taking place after product is hitting the market, right? 2 years later, 2 years and 2 months later, now the product is out there. But then maybe somebody else who decided to build the software a few months before you. You know what I'm saying? That's one. That's one of the possibilities that is out there. The second possibility is that you really had no feedback from the user, because all the feedback that you got is from the testers, from you, right? You tested it. So not the real users had any input on updating or maybe enhancing the software. Then there's other technical challenges, which could be like within that 2 years, whatever framework you're using, maybe whatever coding standard you're using is outdated. Maybe things are changed. Maybe now things has different ways of dealing with. So even on the technical side, you will have challenges to say, okay, now we have to update. We're already 2 years behind, right? So application needs to update and make the up-to-date based on the current technology. So now again, this approach, because you cannot go back, yes, there is some gray area where you can probably make a exception, and it's called change control, right? So let's say implementation is being done, developers found major issue with the design and they want to change. The project manager will have to sign off and say, okay, we're going to do a change control, right? So it has to go back, design it and things like that and come back here. But it rarely, they don't want to take any sort of change request, right? It will be very, very rare to happen, because remember, everything has to be solid 100% before moving into the next step. Now, this project has a pros and cons, guys. Like this approach, this is called waterfall, okay? This approach is called waterfall. So next time you hear waterfall, think about water is being falling one step from another step. So like a stairs, right? And this approach is really, really good for a project that has high security concern. So Department of Defense is building a software. They don't want the whole world to know, then this is fine, right? This is something being built by Chase Bank where they don't want their competitors to know about this, then this is fine. And maybe this has high security issues with also money. So they don't want to play around with the software ahead of time, because it has transaction, it has finance, it has people's information. So they don't want to play around with the software and release it early without all the possible validation that they can do. And this approach is also really, really good because requirement is 100% solid. So there's less back and forth between these guys, right? So designers, they don't have to go too much back and forth. They already have the information, they can work. Same thing for the developers and same thing from the testers. So this happens in a perfect world, basically. But obviously there will be some back and forth. And what they do usually, like once the design phase comes in, the requirement guys, maybe they had 10 BAs, like all 10 or 15 of you guys, they reduce to 2 or 3. Design finished, they reduce to 1 or 2. Just 1 or 2 is there to make sure that anything comes back. Any change control, they can help. Same thing for implementation. If they hire 50 developers, they're gonna get rid of all of them and maybe keep 1 or 2 who has a really good knowledge, and just in case for fixing bugs. And so is the tester. So now this is one of the reasons why there are so many testing jobs, because the project, when the time comes for hiring, they will hire like closing their eyes. They will not even, as long as you can explain SDLC and SDLC really, really well, and you know everything I would say, without having to memorize, and you can explain, then you may be getting hired very quickly, because they don't have the time to like really take 50 people's interviews. The managers are going to go real quick, do 1 round, 2 round, and you're done. You got hired. So this happens in bigger project. Wells Fargo does this all the time. Then you have government jobs where this happens as well, where they just want to fill the position, and then months goes by, 5 months, 6 months goes by, there is no work, and you feel like, oh my god, I'm not doing anything. But then it's really normal, because now, you know, they're probably waiting for implementation to be done, or whatever is the case. They will just say, read the requirement. That's the only thing they will ask you to do. So these really, again, pros and cons. This has pros and cons. Now, if this software approach, this software building approach, which is waterfall, it's really not a good idea for public, social, or maybe any application that will be used by general users, like general public, and who will generate revenue by just visiting your website. And you really, as a company, depend on their visits. So if you do it this approach, like for Facebook, there is really good chance for other people to take over, other companies coming up with similar ideas, and now you will have to risk waiting 2 or 3 years. Now there is other approach, and this is a really popular approach called Agile Scrum, guys. So Agile Scrum idea is that it's more modern, I would say. This is how previously things were done, and still being done, as long as the project has that kind of requirement where security is high, where they want to make sure everything is tip top, and they want to make sure that things are happening correctly. And also this approach is done by vendors a lot, because they don't want to do a lot of interaction and talking with the client. They just want the softwares to be done. So they will say, give us the requirement, we'll get it done, and things like that. So the waterfall approach, again, has its place, but Agile Scrum is the next, you want to know about Agile Scrum, because that's going to be something that you'll like after end of this slides. So in Agile Scrum, what they do is that instead of building the whole entire requirement ahead of time, they said, okay, you know what? Create a backlog, right? Create a backlog, which means all of the requirements, whatever requirements put them in a basket. And then whatever requirement is ready, meaning you have some requirements obviously ready, you cannot have 100% ready. So let's say you got 10% requirement is ready, okay? Then you can actually take that 10% to the next step, which is to introduce to the whole team to do the whole work, right? So now in the next step, it goes to a sprint. Sprint is basically a time duration, okay? And this sprint represents, let's say, 2 weeks. Oh, I'm not good at writing these things. Okay, let's see. This is weeks, guys, W right there, okay. So a sprint means is like a duration of time, right? So they're saying in 2 weeks, you're gonna take this whole thing and inject it here. Okay, so in one sprint, okay, let's look at this one. So they said 30 days, but again, you got companies that will follow 2 weeks, you got companies that follow 3 weeks or 4 weeks. So it really depends. Company has the flexibility, or a team has the flexibility to use the time duration. A sprint means time duration, and it could be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and 4 weeks is the maximum time, right? So your team decided to follow, let's say 2 weeks, forget about 30 days, too much. At least majority of the company, and the reason why I'm forcing you to understand 2 weeks is because majority of the companies uses 2 weeks, and they get the benefit from 2 weeks. In that 2 weeks, they take things that are ready, the 10%, and put it into the sprint backlog, and then they put the team to work and do all of these things, all of these in that 2 weeks. So this 10% is ready to be worked on. And in this 2 weeks time frame, you have requirement, right? So requirement is already done, whatever is ready and it's in here. Then the design happens on the fly in this 2 weeks. Implementation happens as well. Verification testing also takes place. And then it goes for maintenance, release and maintenance. So in these 2 weeks, the 10% of the software is ready to ship, meaning this 10% is ready to be used by the end user by the time you release it to the public. So you can actually choose to release this 10% of the software to the public, but of course, the requirement will be done based on the priority base. Okay, so that way the user can actually make the most out of the application. So you got 2 weeks later, you already have 10% ready to ship state, right? Ready to ship state. And in this case, and I'll probably go ahead and explain a little bit better. I'm going to explain a lot better with the Agile. I'm going to go into another tool to help me kind of explain better. So in this basically 2 weeks, to think about the whole thing is being done in that 2 weeks, but not for the whole 100% of the requirement, but only for the 10%. So now the next 2 weeks starts, okay? The next 2 weeks starts, they're gonna then go ahead and do another 10%. So slowly your application is being built with a small time duration. And in the meantime, you're releasing 10%, 20%, 30% of the application, and you're continue to getting feedback from the actual users when they are using the application. So maybe in the beginning, your company decides to release the software for free because it doesn't have a lot of feature. And then people are using it, they're getting benefit, and then they're giving feedback, which is really, really valuable. And now those feedbacks are being used in order to do the maintenance, in order to basically upgrade and make it more relevant to the user's need. Okay. All right, let's do a test to understand that we did understand like the difference between waterfall and Agile. So I'm going to ask you guys some question, and then I'm going to go really deeper dive into Agile because it has so much more to, it has its own framework to follow. It has the meeting structures and there are some enforcement being done in Agile that we have to talk about. So now let's talk about understanding. So first, Evelina, if you can tell me the difference between Agile and waterfall based on, again, it's okay if you get it wrong, but try your best. What is the difference between Agile and waterfall?
Waterfall is, I guess they're both development life cycles, but one is in steps and the other one is in sprints.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I said that right.
Yeah, so they are basically, waterfall and Agile both are methodology of SDLC. In order to apply, so think like these are formulas, right? So SDLC is a formula, and then now you can take the formula and you can apply in two different approach. One is Agile and the other one is waterfall. On this approach, you get things done in bulk, meaning you finish one and then go into the other, and you're not allowed to go back. In Agile Scrum, where you can take small portion at a time. So whatever you can take as a team for the 2 weeks. So you have 2 weeks goal, right? Every 2 weeks you finish your goal and then you go into the next one and you do another chunk. You basically break down the application to smaller pieces, and every 2 weeks you finish smaller pieces of the application until you're 100% done. So this way you have you can actually predict too, based on the rate in which your team is moving. You can actually predict to say when the entire application will be done. Anybody else want to try before we go into?
I just got a question. So usually Agile Scrum is methodology while the product is released, whereas waterfall is usually before the product is released.
So waterfall is like you cannot release anything because they are dependent on each other, right? So for example, let's say requirement. Yeah, it has to be 100% done. But at this stage, there's nothing to release to the public, right? Or to the user. Then you have design, same thing. You look at the requirement, you create the design, but then again, design doesn't really help anybody. So this is more for like internal people, like QA, developers. And then we have implementation. So when the coding is done, only then you can think about releasing, but then you have to test it. As a company, your reputation is on the line. You can't really just go ahead and release at this point. So you'll probably do the testing first and then think about releasing and maintaining. So now in these phases, you have to wait because there are everything requires time for you to do, even if you hire the max amount of resources like developers and QA and BAs. In here, there is no wait. Day one, you will have the entire team. Day one, right? So day one, you have developers, QA, BA, everybody, right, in your team. Day one, BA on demand, sit down, and he will probably get things ready. So on the day one of your job, day one, starting to build the software, they will say, okay, here are some requirements that we can work in. And now this requirement goes into a 2 weeks goal. So think like 2 weeks goal for the entire team to finish and do all of these for that small chunk of the application. All of these phases will be done for a small chunk of application. That small chunk, let's say 5% of the application. So the next 2 weeks, you do another 5%. And if you move at this rate, you're really within 20 weeks, you're going to be done, right? 20 sprint later. So that means actually 40 weeks. 40 weeks later, your whole application is done if you move at that rate. And so now let's say you just accumulated to 20% of your application and you want to get user feedback, you can release it. You can release it to the beta users. You can release it to alpha users. And they will use it because it's free and they will provide feedback. Okay, so sometime you'll see like even Apple releases beta version of their OS system for iOS or Mac, OS, and you can actually sign up to be the beta tester. And at that point, they are still making changes and development, but they probably reach to the point where they may have more than 50%, or they may have more than like 40% where customers can actually go and make do their whatever they want to do with the application, right? They can actually do whatever benefits them, and in this case. So and that's where the feedback comes in. So let's dive more into Agile, guys, and I'll probably give you guys a little bit of my way of explaining, because this slide really doesn't talk about everything that we can actually think about. So let's talk about those. Let me go ahead and first clear out all the drawings. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and kind of like do some drawing in here. All right, so let me get some shapes. So think like, again, visualization, right? So think about, this is your whole software, right? That you're trying to build. So in Agile, what you're doing is that you're saying, okay, sure, I will build the software, but I'm going to divide the software into smaller pieces. Okay, so you divide the software into manageable pieces here. I'm just going to try to divide as much as I can. Okay, and then maybe like make some of these right there.
Jeez.
All right, so again, it has to be manageable, because in 2 weeks, how much work can you get it done? So if the application doesn't divide into like smaller pieces, it just gets too much work for the whole team. So now let's call this something, right? Let's call this as product backlog, right? Maybe I'll change the color to this, okay. Backlog, okay. So this is product backlog. And this is, again, I'm talking about Agile, forget about waterfall for a minute, and we'll come back to it. Now, in the whole product is divided into smaller pieces, and it was rearranged to a point where each piece has higher priority over the other. So this one has higher priority than this piece, and this one has higher priority than this piece, right? So just know that somebody did the work and they were able to move things in a way, so that way that it is logically ordered and dependable stuff. So for example, login feature needs to be done at the same time as sign up feature, right? So those are already ahead of time done, and you have everything in the right order that needs to be done. So now In Agile, you can now say, all right, I'm gonna now move one piece from here, okay? And I'm gonna have my team work on it. What is that piece? Goes into a sprint backlog, okay? So why do we even call sprint backlog? Because again, guys, think about, let's see if I can make any more. Okay, there we go. So this piece right here, okay, goes into sprint backlog. Okay, just this piece. Okay, so let me just actually resemble, maybe like mark it as this. Okay, this piece is no longer here in the product backlog. It's moved to the sprint backlog. The next thing you and your team did is this sprint backlog right here came here. So we will magnify the sprint backlog. Okay, and we will divide that even further. This small piece needs to be divided into stories. Okay, so at this point, this sprint backlog, I'll give it a proper name, guys. Just bear with me, and then let's, like I said, if you guys have any question, unmute, otherwise muted because everybody can hear you. All right, so let me just finish dividing. It may take a
So
little bit of time.
I just had a quick question. I'm sorry,
Sure, yeah,
I'm losing my voice. I have a sore throat.
no problem.
That one piece from the product backlog that's being moved over into the sprint backlog is being divided into more pieces now.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, understood.
And why we do that? So this is called epic, guys. So this one, each piece, I'm gonna give it a name. Okay, so I didn't create these names, so don't, you know, hold me accountable for this. But these names, again, in Agile, you'll hear fun names, a lot of fun names. So each piece in here in the product backlog is epic, because epic is like a really big story. It's a whole feature. It's a whole feature. It doesn't break down into smaller functionalities, right? Here we call user stories. So each piece here that you see is a user story. Okay, so this user story gets information like what the user will do to the application and what does the system gives them in return. How does the system behavior takes place, right? So it's basically explained in a user point of view. So as a user, and I'll give you a sample one, right? So I can say, as a user, I'd like to log into Facebook, and then I should be able to add friends, right? So that's a user story. So now developers are going to say, okay, so I need to build something that the user can actually log in and then create a story in Facebook, right? So everything is described from the user point of view. So it's really gets easier for you to understand the requirement. It has nothing to do with a lot of technical, like previously the technical document in Waterfall could be like use cases. For example, you describe in 2 columns. On the left column, what is the action the user is doing? And on the right column, you describe what does the system actually responding to that specific action, right? That's how use case is being done in Waterfall. Or functional requirement, it'll be like done very similar, that the way that I'm describing. But in Agile, everything is described as user stories. So the question you should be asking is that why there is a need for dividing even further is because this is the whole story. This is called epic story. And this epic story is basically the whole feature. Not one person in the team can work on that whole feature. The whole team has to work together. So if you have a team of 10 developers and you take that in here, you cannot just have everybody sitting around. So it's better to take this, break it into small manageable pieces, logically order them in priority, right? Again, highest priority in the top. And then you are ready to distribute this as an assignment to your teams. So now that you have a sprint backlog ready, the next logical thing is that your team, you're basically your BA or the product owner ready to start doing a meeting. So on your first day, it's called sprint planning meeting. And this is, again, I didn't create that. So before everybody even start working on it, and I'm giving you guys as a story, right? So follow the story, and I'll actually share this document. So you don't have to write any notes or anything. I'll save it and give it to you guys. So in this case, once this is ready, and this is your first day, but this was ready by BA, right? This was cut down to smaller pieces and was done ahead of time. So on your first day, you have a sprint planning meeting. In this meeting, you guys talk about each and every single user story, okay? And you guys talk about few things, right? You guys talk about, for example, let's see. You guys talk about the estimation. Estimation, how long is going to take. That includes development and QA, because the requirement is done and design is done at this point, right? Design is also done ahead of time, right? They are, so designers and requirement guys, right? So BA are 1 week early than us, right? So they already did this. So we are now estimating for us, developers and QA. So QA and developers has to agree to a specific estimation. So how long is going to take? 2 hours, 3 hours, and both has to agree. So developer says, oh, for me it's 3 hours. Okay, for me it's another 3 hours. So in average, that's 3 hours time for a story that could be like the first story, right? Then clarification. So basically study and clarification. So BA will basically go through each and every single user story in this meeting and read them out loud to you guys and say, guys, any questions? So at that time, you can ask questions and say, wait a minute, you did say that there is gonna be section, header section and then footer section. You didn't say anything about the color or style, right? What should be the color? Is this gonna be same exact color for the footer and header and things like that? So you can actually ask as many questions as you want. You can ask technical question and they will then say, okay, wait a minute, I didn't think about that. Let me go ahead and get back to you. So if they don't have the answer right away, they will then go ahead and get back to you, all right? And later on. So this is basically you, at this point, you got study the requirement, any sort of question you may want to ask. This is the meeting where you want to do this. After that, the whole team, right, agrees to finish all of that, right? So now, as a team, I'm talking about developers, QA, BA, project manager. And so let's say these are, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 32 user stories. It's a lot of user stories, to be honest. In average, if they have 5 points, where let's say each point is equal to 1 hour worth of work. So let's say 5 points means 5 hours of work. And then you have to think about the meetings that you will have over the next 2 weeks. So you have to minus the meetings time. So that way you know properly how much time you'll be spending to finish them. So let's say out of 32, your team agreed that it looks like you guys will finish 15 stories, right? And I'm going to give it a number. So 15 stories, let's say, worth of 50 points, okay? And the points can be done based on, again, relative to a matrix. So if your team agrees to say, okay, 1 point is equal to 1 day, then that's what it is, right? So metrics needs to be created. If the team agrees that, okay, 1 point is equal to half a day, that's up to your team. So you really need to understand what is the value for a point, right? So now, so far so good, right? You guys actually agreed to finish 15 stories as a team. So now what the BA is gonna do, take the remaining stories and put it back in the backlog, and whatever story is ready, the 15th story will be assigned to developers first, okay, after that. So far so good? Any questions before we move on? No questions? Okay. So the next thing can happen, which happens daily. So to resemble daily, I'm just gonna have this, right? This drawing right here. And this takes place daily in that 2 weeks. So this is your entire 2 weeks time frame, guys. Like from here, the 2 weeks starts. I'm gonna give it a line later. I guess this is your day 1, but then if you go down the line, in this 2 weeks, you have another meeting that takes place, right? This meeting is called daily stand-up. Let me give it a new color. Maybe it's better for our eyes. Remember, if you guys have any question, just ask, because this is getting a bit more complex, right? Okay. Daily stand-up meeting. in daily stand-up meeting, you do a few things. What you did yesterday, what, and you only answered 3 questions. Don't talk about, you know, you had a fight with some coworkers, whatever is the case. This is the meeting where you want to talk about what you're going to do today. And number 3, if you have any blocker. So any blocker at all. So like meaning you cannot work, something happened, you know, something happened personally, and now you need to have some sort of resolution from managers or whatever is the case. You need help, right? So these happens, daily stand-up happens daily, right? But sometime, and I'm giving you guys like, just keep open-minded. Sometime what's going to happen is if you already have a sprint planning meeting, they may just say, okay, daily stand-up is not necessary for today. But in that 2 weeks time frame, you're supposed to have every single daily stand-up meeting to explain what you did yesterday, what you're going to do today, and if you have any blockers. Okay, so the 2 weeks still continues, right? So let me just keep drawing. I should have do a line instead. Okay, let me just get a shape. Okay, just take this guy. Okay, so 2 weeks still continues from here. Okay, and let's see. So your 2 weeks keeps continue. Day 1 was sprint planning, and then daily stand meeting that happening every day. Now, here, where is your work, right? Basically, as a QA, right? So think about it. So we have to build some sort of, we have to build a table to kind of show. So I'm going to come back to this time frame real quick, but let's build a table that is going to kind of like show your entire team's progress in that 2 weeks, and that is called sprint board, right? Sprint activity board, let's say, right? So I'm going to build one table real quick. If anybody gets confused, guys, just say, okay, this is too much, let's not do it today. But if not, then we can continue, like I said. So this is your table, and go ahead and like kind of make some columns, right? And these table actually exist at work, meaning you will get a electronic version of this table. Sometimes some companies, they have physical version at work, right? So, okay. So the first thing first, let's write some, okay, I'm gonna lower this to 24. The first one is your product backlog, right? And we talked about those, right? Product backlog, again, let's go ahead and create that in here. So smaller pieces, remember, like, sorry, those are epics. So these are your product backlogs at this point, epics, remember, from that side. Then you take one of them over to here and you make yourself a sprint backlog. So let me just do this. And this is your sprint backlog. So you made one and made it into smaller pieces so that way your team can work on. So that resembles your sprint backlog. Okay. Then the next one is in progress. This is where like in development or in progress. And let me just go ahead and change the color. Okay. So now in progress. In progress is basically something that a developer chooses to work in. So he took this story, he looked like, okay, he took the first story and moved it here, okay? And he says, I'm working on it. He tagged his name or whatever is the case. So here, he basically said, this is something that I am working on. And he tagged his name, let's say his name is A, right? Developer A. So he took it from here. And same thing when from the product backlog, I also have to draw, maybe do the red one. Maybe the first item was broken down into smaller pieces. And one of the piece from sprint backlog went to in progress. That's my developer working. Now, another piece decided to move on here because there is more than one developer. So the next developers is working on this piece. Then you have another piece that developers are working on. That's your second, third piece. So let's say your team has 3 developers. So all 3 are actually working on 3 different user stories. They don't have to wait for each other. So now you got developer A, developer B, developer C. So let's say B and developer C, and they will probably initialize to make sure that they can show who are they that they're working on. So that way you can actually refer to them to say, okay, you're working on this, so I will do this or that, right? So you got 3 stories in progress. But what do you do in the meantime, right? This is your day 2 at work. The first day you had series of meetings. You learned about the product backlog. What is the intention, the goal, or building the software? Then you learned about the sprint backlog, what needs to be worked on. You did estimation, you studied the requirement. You guys agreed to 15 story, which is 50 points of worth to finish in 2 weeks time frame, right? And the next day you wake up and go to work. You have a daily stand-up meeting where you talk about what you did yesterday. So you basically said, yesterday I was in the sprint planning. I learned about the requirement. I worked with developers to point these stories, and that was my day, nothing else. I'm not blocked, right? That's your, today I'll be looking into the stories. That's it, right? You still don't have any work. So now as a QA, you also have your columns, right? So now I'm gonna write it here. When developers are done, it goes into QA, right? So in QA, right? So now once the developer A is done, he will move it to in QA. Sometimes he will just say this is ready. So you yourself have to assign it to yourself. So this user story, let's say B says I'm done, right? And now you can go as a QA engineer to say, okay, I'm gonna work on this. So let's say I'm just actually gonna choose drawing. So for example, B was done before A, and you decided to move this over to QA. So let's give yourself a new color. Okay, so you took this story from here and it's no longer here, okay? And you moved it here. And the same thing, these 3 story came from these 3 locations. I'm gonna just kind of mark it so we kind of know where it came from. Okay, so these 3 stories actually moved here. And now one of the stories is ready for QA and it is assigned to you. What will you do? Let's see, give you guys 5 seconds to think about. In this case, what will you do to say I'm done and moving it to the next phase? So I'm gonna write the next columns. In the meantime, you tell me what you will do to say I'm done testing. Okay. Think about it, guys. Okay, so we got 2 more columns, guys. So who wants to try? Again, like I said, if you start trying, you will probably start to break the ice and you'll enjoy the class a bit more.
So in this phase over here, it would go back to the requirements and the specifications and basically run through it detailed and one by one to make sure that it's hitting each points.
Okay, so you're right, but the thing is there is a technical process that you can explain even easy way, right? So yes, you're gonna go and you're gonna say, okay, now I want to study the requirement. I want to understand what I need to test. You write your checkpoints and you go each one at a time and see if they work as the specification is saying. And then you say, okay, I'm done. So now in this case, if this is you, I would say the best way to describe this would be like, if you kind of like talk about, again, SDLC. I may be sounding annoying to you guys right now because I'm mentioning so many times. This is SDLC. In this case, this engineering process, software testing lifecycle, you will apply to say, okay, I'm now done testing. What is the first thing that you will have to do, right? So you have to study your requirement, right? I'm gonna write it in short form, okay? Then you'll have to do a test plan, right? So in this case, in Agile, we don't do test plans. But if they ask, you can say yes. If that is required, then you will do, but test plan is not necessary. So we write test scenarios. So scenarios, C and All right, OS. All right, and then we write test cases. We then do test execution. We will then do, we'll find bugs. So basically log bug and track at the same time. So that way we know when it's finished, right? When they fix it. Number 6, we will be then helping. The next one is going to be basically. So at this point, if the bug is done, then you'll close the story. You'll then say, okay, it's ready for UAT. When this goes to UAT, UAT is done by who? Guys, we talked about it. So this story, let's say you did all of this and you tested it, everything is good. The next phase, so it's no longer here, okay, assigned to you. You decided to move that over. And now this story is actually, so let me get the yellow. And now this story moved here. So now UAT could be somebody like product owner, somebody who actually initially requested the user story, somebody who actually built the user story. So it could be your BA, right? It could be the person who worked on the backlog, okay? So now that person doesn't have a lot of idea, but do you want that person to reinvent any wheels? That's the question, right? So now if that person sit down to do testing and they have to reinvent wheels, it doesn't make sense. So there's a few ways that we help them to do the testing. One is that we give them test cases, so that way they can follow and do their testing. And then this is the second set of I to verify everything is done. Another way is because these guys don't want to spend too much time. They already trust you. They make sure that you did your thorough testing, and that's what you are there for. So they will say, oh, just show me a demo. So now you go jump on a call and say, okay, this is what I tested. This is how it looks like. This is everything seems to be checking out. These are the test cases. And they'll say, okay, approved, right? So now it's approved. But again, it really depends who is the person who is basically the UAT tester. So now if that person is easy, then it goes into the next step. The next step will be ready for release. Okay, so now I will do another drawing. So this comes to the ready for release. So in this process, guys, obviously just ask me if I have to repeat the whole process. So now each of the stories from your sprint backlog, right, start to move from in progress to in QA to ready for UAT to release. By the time you're done with your 2 weeks, okay? So I'm gonna write right here, your 2 weeks actually starts, okay, let me just go ahead and remove that. 2 weeks starts your backlog, product backlog is different. So 2 weeks actually starts from here. And in these 2 weeks, you did numbers of things, okay? So you had your daily stand-up, you had a sprint planning that took place exactly here, okay? So sprint planning actually happened in the very beginning. And then you have every single day, you have the daily stand-up meetings, right? So this is your, let me see if I can draw it. In that 2 weeks, this is your sprint planning. And this is another meeting, guys. If anybody knows, let me know. This is the last time there is a meeting, right? Before you conclude your sprint, before you actually say, I'm done with the sprint number 1, which was 2 weeks, there is another meeting. It's like a closure meeting, and we'll talk about that. And there is another meeting that takes place here in the midway, right? Midway. And then daily meetings happens every single day. So I'm gonna daily meeting, I'm gonna do the blue one, right? So blue one, think about, let me do a shape. So the blue one is daily meeting, okay? That happens, that's supposed to happen every day. Maybe these 2 days are exception. But let me just lay it down to you guys. Okay, so let me just write it. The first one, guys, what was the first meeting? You guys remember?
Sprint daily stand-up. Sprint planning.
Meeting, right? Okay. Then we have daily stand-up. This is for the whole thing. So daily stand-up meeting. Okay, so that goes this way and also goes the opposite way. And again, daily stand-up meeting sometimes gets canceled because you have other priority items. So it really depends what is the day. Then you have mid sprint. We talked about a mid one, right? And this is actually also an essential meeting, and it's called sprint grooming meeting. And you'll just probably like by now you probably like, this guy's gonna come up with more meetings. But I didn't create this. So now you have a sprint grooming meeting that happens in the mid sprint. Is because why? Is because when you are working on the sprint, right, and you're finishing up with your sprint backlog, somebody has to work on the next item and break it down. Okay, so in the meantime that you're doing this, your BA, your product owner, they are working on the next item. They broke it down already, but they need you to confirm that everything is done correctly, or they need you to give your expertise, your opinions to do grooming, meaning does it have enough information? Does it have everything that you need? So that way, the next time the sprint starts, you can just estimate and work on it. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense, right, guys? So now this meeting, I'll just go ahead and point it out like this, and maybe some shape will kind of help. Okay. All right. So this meeting happens very much in the mid sprint. So that means if you started your sprint on Wednesday, the very next Wednesday will be your sprint grooming, where you don't talk about existing items that you're working on. You're never going to talk about what you're currently working on. You'll talk about the future sprint. So that way you can have few things ready early. So at the time of finishing sprint, when you finish your sprint, you can do a sprint planning and talk about the next items to work with. Okay. Any questions? All right. Looks like we're gonna finish right on time, and we're almost like done with Agile. Okay, so then another meeting is called retrospective. So sprint retrospective meeting is another one. And what do you do in this meeting is that you talk about the last 2 weeks that you guys worked in as a team. In these 2 weeks, you guys not only reviewed the sprint backlog and kind of developers, they did the coding. Once the coding was done, you did the testing, and you had your whole SDLC engineering process in place to make sure you know exactly when the test is done, and you moved it over. You did the testing, finally you get an approval, and it went for release, and one by one, everything moved here. And at the end of the sprint, you guys are ready to release whatever percentage. So if this percentage, like this many stories, is considered as 5%, then 5% of the stories, sorry, 5% of the entire product is done and is ready for release. On the last day, because you guys did that, on the last day, it's like a victory meeting, right? This is almost like a victory meeting, but at the same time, you cannot celebrate early. So in this sprint planning, what they're going to do is that they're gonna basically try to understand few things about what happened in the last 2 weeks, because there's always a learning opportunity. So now in this sprint, in this meeting, there will be 2 levels of conversation, and one will be what really went well. So throughout the last 2 weeks, what went well, and then and what didn't go well. So not well, maybe, right? So each team member will have to write 2 things, one that went really well, and the other one is that didn't go well. The idea is that whatever that didn't go well, they will properly note them, and then they will try to avoid them for the next sprint, because this was your very first sprint, right? You guys just finished your first sprint, okay? You guys finished all the expected items, and then it is ready for release. So in the retrospective meeting, if you happen to not finish all the expected work, meaning you guys agreed to 50 points and 15 story, and you guys finished 14, and it was only like maybe 40 points, then the Scrum Master, which is the Agile coach, who's basically going to host all of this meeting. So you don't have to do these meetings yourself, you're just participants. So Agile coach is gonna say, guys, we estimated to finish 50 points and you guys went very close. I'm proud of you guys, but the thing is, next time we want to be more accurate and try to finish exactly what we try to exactly what we agreed to. So he's just going to try to push and push, get the most out of you guys. And that's his job. But most importantly, a Scrum Master, his job is to be a coach. He's going to be the cheerleader, and he's going to try to cheer everybody up at any given time. He's like a manager, but at the same time, he's not a manager. He is there for coaching, not for doing any sort of discipline. But he can actually refer for discipline to the project manager to say, okay, this person is not listening. So in this case, two things will be written down. Scrum Master will then note them properly, and then he will say, okay, let's next sprint we're gonna do this better. We're gonna make sure we don't do this and we don't do that, whatever that didn't go well. So now that you finish your sprint, so let's say you started on Wednesday, and one Wednesday you had a sprint planning, a sprint grooming, and you guys actually, as a team, you guys worked on the next item from the product backlog. So this next item is already actually done for you to take it into the next sprint. So this is out, and there was another one created just like this, okay? Another one created just like this. I'm gonna use this symbol to say, okay, this is like almost like that. And now you have to start sprint 2 because sprint 1 was done just now, right? Sprint 1 was 2 weeks, 2 weeks done. You guys already called it a victory. You guys had all these user stories done. You guys did 40 points. You guys are ready to work on the next sprint. So what do you think is going to happen on the last day, right after the sprint retrospective? Any idea, guys? What do you think is going to happen right after? Do you think everybody goes home and that's it, call it a day? Or do you think they will get back to work, and what kind of work they should do?
They're going back to work and they're going back to sprint planning, I guess, for the next.
Exactly. Yes.
sprint.
Yes. So now, let's say this retrospective was done at 1 p.m. You guys had the release stand-up meeting early morning. You guys did some release planning, whatever release was done in the morning, whatever is the case. 1 p.m. after lunch, you guys had the retrospective. Everybody seems like happy and relaxed because it was done. Like 2 weeks was done. Things were moved and tested, and everything looks good. So now 1 p.m. Meeting was done, which is retrospective. After that, you guys will have another meeting, right? Maybe like you all take half an hour break. So usually the Scrum Master is nice enough to do another break. So now sprint 1 was done, but sprint 2 will start with the first meeting, which is sprint planning. So the same day you'll have sprint planning, and it will just continue to go on and on and on for each and every single sprint. Okay, so if you know sprint 1, you know all of the sprints. This is going to be happening same thing every single sprint. So now you can say, okay, where is the SDLC? I don't see no SDLC here. I see SDLC, but I don't see. This is SDLC, right? So product backlog, this is a requirement, okay? Requirement gets further refinements so that basically the requirement also, consider the requirement is also part of the design too. So design has to be done because again, you guys 1 week before in the mid sprint, you guys make sure as a QA and developer to make sure that the requirement is complete. It has design, it has everything, right? So you know when you are ready to do a sprint planning meeting for the next sprint, your things are waiting. Your stories are ready to be taken. The only thing is left is estimation, right? You gotta do estimation, understand the requirement more, and kind of agree to a specific number of story that your team will do, the whole team. Hopefully that gave you guys some idea, because now in the 2 weeks is going to just continue to repeat because SDLC is happening right here. The whole SDLC process is happening in this direction, and in this direction SDLC is taking place. Okay, this is where also bug lifecycle comes in. So I'm going to probably explain a little bit about bug lifecycle, because when you find bug, what happens next, right? So just think about that. Let me just draw something actually.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. So the
Sure.
SDLC is all the, I guess, the product backlog, the sprint backlog, and so forth. And then within that is the STLC.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. So, okay. So I just want to explain a little bit about the bug lifecycle. So what do you do if you find a bug? Do you just like throw this story away? You just keep the story where it is in your QA. And then once you create the bug, you can send this story back to progress, where a developer is going to work on it, and they will then give you back the story to work on. So again, remember, these are stories. This is epic story. This is regular story, right? Remember the names, because this is the names that we're going to be using throughout the whole time. So now bug lifecycle, what happens? So think about that. I'm going to try to do as best as I can with the drawing. Let's see. Red resembles bug. Let's say, oh goodness, okay. Probably. Let me just release. Okay, I'm just gonna find some more space here. Okay, so at here, let's say you found a bug right here at the time of testing. You found it, all right? So what do you do first when you find the bug? Okay, you then go ahead and log it, right? You create a bug report. Create bug report. Bug report is very extensive because you cannot just simply say this is not working and that is not working. You have to provide in writing where it is, how it is, what version of software, what version of browser that you're using, what are the data that you're using, like test data, and then screenshots, screen video, right? So it's not just simply, okay, here, this is not working, right? So they will not take it. If you cannot say it in writing, that's not a bug, period. You have to be able to reproduce and give them a bug report. So once the bug is confirmed and you reported it, this story goes back to the developer, because this is the story where the bug you found, right? So they have to rework on that story and fix this bug. The next thing that the developer will do is that right here, they will say, okay, it's fixed, right? So let me use the green one actually. So after logging it initially, the developer took it back and they fix it, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and write this here. So this was fixed by developer. So once this fix is gonna be reassigned to you, the next, right after that is gonna be reassigned to you. So now you have to do something, right? You found your story came back to yourself and you have to retest it. So you have to retest everything you did. So all the test cases that you wrote, you have to retest it to make sure that the bug, not only the bug is not there, but also it's not there in other places that you tested before. So you have to test everything. So now here you can say retest. Okay, so now you guys know what retest is, right? Because that's the interview questions. They will say, what is the difference between retest and the other tests, right? So you can say retest is when we tested when the bug is fixed, when you test again everything after the bug is fixed. So just keep in mind. Okay, so once the bug is retested, there is two possible outcome of this bug. Okay, two possible. Can you guys tell me what could be the other outcome? Right? What are the outcomes of the retest? When you did the retest, what can happen? There's only two things can happen, right?
Either it's fixed or there's a bug again.
Passed or fail, right? So let's do fail inside or something, right? So, okay, fail. So either cases, you either will see that your test is passing or failing, right? So your test failing because the bug isn't fixed, or maybe this bug fixes created more issues than what it's fixing. In this case, you're gonna take turn, right? So let's say it is, I'm gonna have to use red. So let's say it took turn on, oh goodness, okay. Let's say it went to fail, okay? So you're not going in this direction. So if it did pass, then what happens? What do you do next? If it did pass, let me go back to the color real quick, this, and then you're gonna go ahead and close it, right? This is the next thing, you're gonna go ahead and close the bug. Okay, so closed. The bug is closed, right? And it's done, right? And you move on with the next story and you just do the same exact thing. But if it fails, then you go ahead and do another thing, right? So you have to reassign, maybe reopen the bug, right? So bug was already marked as resolved by the developer because developer thought that he fixed it, but it's not fixed, right? So you're gonna say, I'm gonna go ahead and reopen it, right? Reopen the bug, right? So you found that it's not working and you're not too happy with it. That's fine. It will be reopened. Once the reopen is done, then the developer will fix it again, guys. And then you follow this cycle until you meet at the destination, which is closed. So you can then take your story and say, okay, nothing outstanding here, no other bugs. I will go ahead and give it to the UAT people. Now, I'll give you guys some warning from experience. Don't rush it and give it to the UAT thinking they're going to come and say, wow, you finished it so quickly. The thing is that if UAT finds the bug, that means, have you done your job? UAT is not even doing in-depth testing. They just want to see if it's working. That's it. Right? So it's very, very embarrassing for QA members to finish their testing and then UAT people find bugs. Okay, because we are the one who supposed to find bug. UAT is supposed to what? Do acceptance. They're doing UAT testing, which is user acceptance testing. Okay, so now they will just accept to say, okay, things were tested. I feel like this is meeting what I was looking for, and that's it. But if they do find a bug and you missed it and you rushed it because you wanted to maybe like show them that you're really fast, the problem is, as a QA, we don't try to be fast, right? We want to make sure that we do as thorough testing as possible. And if that takes time, then we will basically take that time. If somebody rushes you, you tell them like, okay, do you want to compromise on quality? You know, like we don't want to compromise on quality. So you can just give them warning, listen, I hate to compromise on quality, but if you're going to rush me, I may miss a few things. I need absolutely focusing on one thing at a time. So when I'm done, right? I'll let you know. But you can also say it the nice way, right? Just don't say it like what I said, right? Just say, okay, I'm working on this. I want to make sure that everything is done properly and thoroughly tested, and then I can move it on to the next one. But if this guy right here, this story has a bug and you're waiting because the developers keep failing and this is happening, you can work on another story. You can actually do another story. So you can move on to the next assignment where you can then, you know, we can make some progress on the other one. You don't have to just get blocked on one and just wait. So we don't do that. So at this point, you know what bug life cycle looks like, right? You create it. If it gets fixed, you retest it. If it passes, you close them. If it doesn't pass, you then reopen it and reassign it to the developer. Developer then fixes, and then you can retest. If it fails again, then do the same thing. This cycle will continue until the bug is closed. Okay. Now, every day at work, if you, excuse me, if you join a team, the likelihood of working in Agile is close to 90, maybe 98%. Okay. Unless you end up working for the government, right? So you got a government project, that's different, right? Because they have security concern and they have things already in advance ready, right? Because the government has the money, they don't care about users. They only care about providing the service to the user. It's not user centric. So you'll see a lot of government projects, like all of a sudden they came up, like for example, Obamacare after like a couple of years, you know, like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years of development or something like that. I don't know, but it came out and then now it crashed, right? And a lot of things went through, a lot of bugs, and it's because the real user wasn't even there. And, you know, they didn't have a feeling for how many users going to come in and what are the servers, if the server can handle that much of a load, and if the code is even rewritten efficiently, right? The only way you can make your code more and more efficient, meaning your application become more efficient, if somebody uses it and gives you some feedback and say, okay, this is where I see it's slow and things like that. So there is a lot of factors there, but I'm sure they try to do the right thing, follow waterfall and try to get everything up and running. But there were still problems, right? So with Agile, it's pretty safe, I would say, because you get the feedback right away. It's out there, people will notice any changes, anything that doesn't work well, and they will probably let your team know through emails or whatever is the case. But most importantly, we are not looking to work in waterfall, guys. We have to be able to work in agile. So we're going to talk a lot more in agile, but the reason why I went to this extent on explaining, because this is going to be your daily life where you wake up, you go to work, you have your daily stand-up meeting. So if you work remotely, by the way, 80 to 90% of the jobs are remote right now. So if you do work remotely, you wake up and you go to your desk, sit down. The first thing you're going to have a daily stand-up meeting. Once it's done, you go into this board. This is electronic, by the way. So in this board, you go and you see what is assigned to you. So sometimes the assignment comes from the managers and you can see what you need to work on. The other time you will say, okay, which story will be done first? Developers are working on this story and it looks like this is going to be done first. So you can already start looking into this and you can already start studying this story. And once you are ready, and once the developers are ready, then you can start to writing the test cases and execute. And then you can say, I'm done. And you can probably follow up with the developers to say if there's a bug or not bug, right? Very easy process, right? And then your day is over and next day you start, same thing. You have a daily stand-up meeting. You go to this board and see what's ready for testing. You do your STLC and you move on, right? You help these guys because you tested it. So you know the feature, you just explain to them how it is and they're happy and it's ready for release. When the release takes place, there is again a few more steps we can probably talk about. Maybe today is going to be too much, but when the release takes place and they find bugs, the user finds bugs, the actual user finds bug, right? It's sometimes embarrassing if it's obvious issue, then they will say, okay, how come you couldn't catch that, right? But if it's not an obvious issue, then obviously you will have to find it yourself, right? So the release happened, you have to do post-release validation, which is called smoke test. So you log in as a user. Now you're in production. You're actually into the actual website. You're going to log in. You're going to be really, really careful. You don't want to mess up user information. You don't want to basically do anything that will raise a flag. And just go in there, slowly check everything is working fine. And then you can come back and say, okay, release was successful. So as a QA engineer at the release, they will not go home unless you say everything is fine. So they will wait. So release happened, right? In your DevOps team. And I'm talking about at least 20 to 30 people are on the line in conference. And you're on the line too. And they're going to say, okay, so how did it go? And you have to test it to say, okay, well, I tested it last 30 minutes. Looks like everything is fine. Guys, have a nice day. Everybody, get some sleep, whatever is the case. If it's a late night release, if it's a weekend release, it's going to be the similar case. But if you do find issues, then they will have to fix it on the spot. Okay, they will have to fix it on the spot and then do another release, and then everybody's going to just wait, right? So for that time, you get compensated. You get extra money if it's Saturday. If it's like happens on late night, then you get the next day off. Whatever is the case, guys. But they will not make you do that kind of work for free. But think about it, the level of engagement, right? The level of ownership that you need to be a QA engineer in a development team at this point. Think about it. If you don't learn everything the right way, then like when you start your daily meeting, you're going to be very nervous, right? If you go into sprint planning, you might be like, oh my God, I don't know what to do, right? So is when, if you don't know what STLC is, you're going to be super confused. When is the story done? And you're testing it. In 2 days, 3 days goes by, and it seems like testing is not ending. That means you don't know STLC process properly, right? That means you don't know when to stop testing, right? You could be going on and on, right? You can keep testing it, but you have to know exactly when to stop. So that's when STLC is going to come handy. So these will make you a proper QA engineer. And later in this course, when we go through the syllabus, we're going to learn some of the tools and technology that we can use to be really, really efficient about doing this work. This workflow we're going to follow. We're going to basically do this work in a company where we will use other tools to be more efficient. So for example, test case, instead of test case, we're going to write test script, which is automation. So you can actually run them. So if developer says, hey, can you retest? You don't have to retest. You click on a button and it will automatically test everything again for you. And then 5 minutes later, you tell developers, hey, you didn't fix it. And you can right away reject it, right? That's where the automation comes and makes you more efficient, right? But automation doesn't make you a tester, guys. Automation doesn't make you a tester. What makes you a tester is this understanding your SDLC, understanding your SDLC, and knowing exactly where your place is in your team and this whole process, okay? So hopefully I was able to give you guys a right image of the actual workplace today that is going to happen. But this, everything that I described, that happens in a perfect world. That means there are teams that they choose to not have a sprint grooming meeting, and they combine that with sprint planning. So just know that even if you're missing a meeting, that means maybe they combined it with another meeting or something. But this should happen. This is a standard, right? This is a standard. And if any Scrum Master joins your team, if you have an Agile coach, he will probably fight to have everybody follow this process. Everybody follow this process, because you have to trust the process. Especially process helps the team to be better and better and better, especially when you have a retrospective meeting that is there just to improve every sprint, continuous improvement. Okay. With that said, guys, I'm gonna save this drawing. I don't know how much you guys can absorb from this material, but the next homework is gonna be a little bit chatty, right? We're gonna give you questions that will talk about SDLC, and all of that. I'll try to give you guys tonight. And the last homework we didn't give you because it's 2 days, and also we know that some of you guys weren't going to join, so we didn't want to make that confusion, guys. But anyway, so in this homework, what I need you guys to do, just be yourself. Even if you read the material outside, like in Google or something, you typed it in and it came up, read it first. Read it and write it in your own view. Okay, you don't have to be like somebody who memorized and know everything, right? Don't try to be, I guess don't try to think like, okay, I'm gonna memorize everything and then I'm gonna then write it. Just go ahead and do your research, I would say. Go on Google, type some stuff, read it, understand it, and then write your answer. And that's what I want. I don't want you to go and memorize it. I don't want you to go and spend unnecessary amount of time, but you should be able to explain. So the next class, if you did the homework, obviously everybody is expected to do the homework, but if you do the homework, I'm gonna ask everybody one question randomly. I don't know which one is gonna be on you, but you have to explain in your view, what do you think about that question? So it could be like, okay, tell me about SDLC process. Your story is ready and it's assigned to you. What do you do next, right? Can you explain to me properly? So that could be a one question for your homework, and you will be expected to answer that, right? And if you cannot answer that, your homework, you know, what does it say about your homework? Think about it, right? So just know it. Like I said, it's not that difficult. All you have to do, even if you Google it, read it first, understand it, so that way you can explain it in the class and then you can write it. That's it. It's very simple, guys. Just follow the process, trust the process, and we're gonna make it toward this end of this class, and hopefully we're gonna start to market and get a job at some time. But for now, let's see if I can save this real quick. Download. All right, I was able to save it. Share. Let's see. Okay, allow. All right, so I'm gonna copy the link. Maybe that's better than just sharing the okay, I'll try to do both, guys. Okay, so you got a link on your chat. That's one thing, you'll get it. The second thing, okay, so Command B. This is gonna be your link, and then I will also upload from the image. So for those who cannot, maybe will not have access later in this link, I think the link should be at least there, visible. But if not, then you got the drawing in PNG. You can actually zoom in as much as you want to. But this document has like kind of like a bird eye view in a story mode, right? What happens in the 2 weeks. So imagine like every 2 weeks, you guys do the same thing. Before you know it, on your 20th sprint, your product is ready, fully ready, right? But at the same time, because you guys are releasing every 2 weeks, right? People are actually giving you feedback on whatever percentage of work is being done. But most importantly, whenever you get the feedback, you also add those stories back to the sprint backlog or product backlog, right? So if there's a new feature, recommendation came from the user and they said, okay, we really want this. And then the company, or at least the business people, they thought that, oh, wow, okay, that's a good recommendation. They will probably put it in front of everything here for the next sprint. So the next sprint, your team is going to just focus on that, right? So it's going to be very much user-centric. They're building the product for the user. They're also taking users' recommendation, but most importantly, they're getting feedback, and also they're getting paid. So at some point, the company is probably going to say, okay, it's no longer unpaid. You guys have to start paying. We added this and that features and functionality, so it has a premium, or they can make like one version of the software free and then premium version they have to pay, right? So at least they can retain, or at least they can accumulate traffic or customers at this point. With that said, I want to leave 5 minutes for you guys with questions. Any questions from this class and what can be the homework? And again, like I said, homework is expected. There is a person dedicated to just checking your homework. Okay, so please, we're taking you guys very seriously as of right now. And so we basically expect the same, right? So just make sure you do that. Take this seriously, just trust the process and just do as we do in class. And trust me, by the time we go to our, maybe 7th or 8th class, you're going to be fine. You're going to be enjoying it better. But if you manage to get lost, somehow it will be really hard, because these are the basic classes, right? This is the basic topics that we're talking about. What will happen if you go technical, right? What will happen when we go programming? And we're learning how to program, which requires like really attention. It requires a lot of attentions. So you may have to drink coffee and sit down and just concentrate. There will be on the weekends, there will be times where you'll have to do that. So this is, again, basic classes. Focus now, so that way you can be on track for the future classes. Guys, expect the homework. And if you have any question, you can always put it in the chat. If not me, somebody else will answer from our group. Otherwise, if there's any question, I'll take it. Otherwise, I will end the class for the day. Okay, so that's good. Yes, on your first syllabus day, which I anticipate the next week because we finished the slide today. On your first syllabus day, I'm going to share a course that has everything that I talked about in perspective of another person. Meaning there is another instructor who has a video very well organized, and we're going to share the entire course that you can do it alongside of ours. That was for self-paced. That means you don't have to have prior knowledge, but you'll have access to the course, so you can do it in parallel if you need to. But the priority will be here, right? Priority is going to be in person. We expect you to pay attention during the class, so you don't have to even look at the video later. But most importantly, I would say we're going to share materials as well that you can do it self-paced. But again, like I said, self-paced is in addition to what we're doing in class, right? So just make sure priority is in the class, and then the other one is just if you have extra time and you want to do it. So we're going to share next time, guys, the next class. Is there anything we can read to supplement what you're teaching? Yes, you can. All right, I'll give you guys something. So this is something that, okay, everything that I said, this guy on YouTube did it really well. Okay, so, and I'm jealous, but I'll still share with you guys, okay? And this is something that I usually put it on my class for 10 minutes, for the first 10 minutes, and then I explain. But here's the homework, guys. The entire homework can be done by looking at this 10 minutes video. Period. Entire homework. If you guys have time, I can play it now. Everybody can watch it. It's like required. How many people have, I guess, how many of us have time or you don't have time? It's only 10 minutes that I'm
I
asking
could
for.
stay if you want me to.
Okay. So everything that I said, okay. Here's the thing, right? So you're going to compare, just be open-minded because again, I come from a different background than this guy. This guy is selling product and that's why he did a 10 minutes video, but he is going to be really smooth, really nice on explaining things, but it's going to be really quick. So really have the focus, just focus on what he's saying and look at the screen as much as possible because it's going to be real quick, 10 minutes, but he will explain everything that I said in 10 minutes, everything that I did. Okay, so that's the important thing. So just make sure, take this very seriously. Let me know if you guys can hear the video. Can you guys hear the video?
Let her play some more. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I can't hear it.
Okay, okay. So I'm gonna full screen and let's see, guys. I'm gonna also watch this. It's every time I watch it, this is maybe like my 20th times.
Yeah, so can't hear.
Okay, somebody says no sound. Let me just go ahead and see some setting. How many people having no sound, guys?
No
Okay,
sound.
so no sound. Okay, let me go ahead and I'm gonna stop sharing and I'm gonna like try to change the setting. Sound, share sound. Okay. 1 second. All right. Okay, can you guys see the screen where this person is there?
We can see your screen. It's the Google Drive.
Oh, no, that's not the one. Okay, I was sharing the wrong screen. 1 second. Share sound, and then here we go. I have to put password. Okay, 1 second.
Yeah, we can see the guy play the video.
My name is Hamid Chojai, and I've been involved with a number of software development
How's that now? You guys can hear, right?
Yeah, I can hear.
Perfect, yes.
That's good. Yeah.
Okay, good.
projects
Thank you.
over the years at a number of different companies, and I've come to recognize Scrum as one of the best agile development practices in use today. In this fast-paced video, I want to show you why Scrum is so great and how you can get started with Scrum in under 10 minutes. I'll cover all the core Scrum concepts like product backlogs, team roles, sprints, burn-down charts, and more. So get ready to be bombarded with information. Let's say this is the product we want to build. For this product, we get all kinds of feature requests from customers, executives, or even other team members. In Scrum, features are written from the perspective of the end user. Therefore, features are known as user stories. The collection of all these user stories is called the product backlog. Another way to think of the product backlog is to think of it as a wish list of all the things that would make this product great. Once we have our wish list or the product backlog, we need to start planning which specific user stories we're going to be putting into a particular release of our product. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's back up a bit. To build this product, we need to have one or more people in our team who are going to play a variety of roles. First, we need her. She plays the role of product owner and helps make sure the right features make it into the product backlog, representing the users and customers of the product. She helps set the direction of the product. Then we need this guy. He's the Scrum Master, and his job is to make sure the project is progressing smoothly and that every member of the team has the tools they need to get their job done. He sets up meetings, monitors the work being done, and facilitates release planning. He's a lot like a project manager, but that's such a boring title, so we'll call him a Scrum Master to imply he knows some jujitsu. And the rest of the team has similar roles to other development processes. These guys build the product, while these guys test it to make sure it works right. These guys use it and hopefully pay for it. And these guys They generally get in the way, but it turns out you can't build many products without them. But let's get back to this, release planning. To plan a release, the team starts with this, the product backlog, and they identify the user stories they want to put into this release. These user stories then become part of the release backlog. The team then prioritizes the user stories and estimates the amount of work involved for each item. Sometimes larger user stories are broken down into smaller, more manageable chunks. The collection of all the estimates provides a rough idea of the total amount of work involved to complete the entire release. A quick side note about estimates. There are a lot of techniques for creating good estimates. Some prefer estimating in story points, where estimates are made relative to building a small component with a known level of difficulty. Unfortunately, story points don't answer the question of, when will my project ship? I've found that the best technique is to estimate work in hours, but to use some standards in how estimates are done. For example, things that take less than a day to complete will be estimated as 1 hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, or 8 hours. Every item will fall into one of those buckets. There will be no 3-hour estimates, for example. A 3-hour item would fall into the 4-hour bucket. Larger items will be estimated as 2 days, 3 days, 5 days, or 10 days. Again, all estimates in between will fall into the next larger bucket. Extremely large items are similarly estimated in months, 1, 2, 3, or 6 months. But the reality is that such items will need to be broken down substantially before work actually begins. We'll come back to these estimates in just a minute. But for now, let's get back to this, the release backlog. With a prioritized set of user stories and the estimated amount of work at hand, we're now ready to plan out several sprints to get the work done. Sprints are short duration milestones that allow teams to tackle a manageable chunk of the project and get it to a ship-ready state. Sprints generally range from a couple of days to as much as 30 days in length, depending on the product's release cycles. The shorter the release cycles, the shorter each sprint should be. And you'll want to have at least 2 to as many as a dozen sprints in a given release. So at this point, we can take our release backlog and split it up into several of these, sprint backlogs. One of the most important things to remember about sprints is that the goal of each sprint is to get a subset of the release backlog to a ship-ready state. So at the end of each sprint, you should have a fully tested product with all the features of the sprint 100% complete. Since sprints are a very short but a realistic representation of part of the product, a late finish of the sprint is a great indicator that the project is not on schedule and something needs to be done. Therefore, it's extremely important to monitor the progress of each sprint with this, a burndown chart. The burndown chart is the #1 reason for Scrum's popularity and one of the best project visibility tools to ensure a project is progressing smoothly. The burndown chart provides a day-by-day measure of the amount of work that remains in a given sprint or release. In this graph, you can see that the amount of work remaining bounces up and down from day to day, but is generally trending towards 0. Because historical information is provided in the burndown chart, it's easy to see if the team is on the right track. Using the burndown chart, the team can quickly calculate this, the slope of the graph, which is also called the burndown velocity. This is the average rate of productivity for each day. For example, a team's rate of productivity might be that on a typical day they finish approximately 50 hours of work. Knowing that, it's possible to calculate an estimated completion date for the sprint, or even for the entire release based on the amount of work remaining. What's great about the burndown chart is that we can compare our actual velocity and projected completion date to what the team needs to do in order to finish on time. This is perhaps the most useful piece of knowledge that any team member, product owner, or product executive can have about the project. Because knowing whether or not the project is on track early in the schedule can help teams make the proper adjustments necessary to get the project on track. The burndown chart provides empirical proof that the project is on track or if it's going to be late. So let's talk a little about where the data for this incredibly useful burndown chart comes from. As you recall, part of the release planning process was to create an estimate for each user story in the release backlog. The collection of these estimates for a given sprint represents the total amount of work that must be done to complete that sprint. As each team member goes through and makes progress on one or more of the user stories, they simply update the amount of time remaining for each of their own items. So the total amount of time remaining on the group of user stories that make up a sprint changes on a day-by-day basis, hopefully going downward until it hits 0 when the sprint is complete. The burndown chart aggregates the remaining work data and shows it visually. It's brilliant because it communicates a massive amount of information in just a few seconds. And that brings us to this, the Daily Scrum. The Daily Scrum is an essential tool to having communication flow freely between team members. The idea is to have fast-paced, stand-up meetings where team members quickly list the work they have completed since the last meeting and any obstacles in their way. By meeting daily, it ensures the team is always in sync and any major issues are dealt with as soon as they are known. Finally, as each sprint comes to a finish, it's important to have a sprint retrospective meeting where the team can reflect on what went right and areas of improvement. After all, Scrum is a flexible, agile development method that needs constant improving and tweaking for every team. So there you have it, Scrum in under 10 minutes. You now know all the essential concepts to start implementing Scrum inside of your organization. But wait a second, what about tools to help you implement?
All right, the tool part. So they're selling a tool, of course, but we're gonna learn the popular tool about implementing Agile. So Agile needs a tool because all of these stories and backlogs and all this information, burn down chart, burn up chart, and there's other charts as well. Where do they go? How do they create those metrics? We can't do all of them in Excel. So there is a tool, project management tool that we're going to learn. And when we get to it, but I hope this was helpful. This is from another perspective. And remember the last thing, what the guy said, right? It's always adjusted to your team, right? Meaning Agile is flexible. So every end of the sprint, the team can choose to make some adjustment. So no matter who you talk to, or no matter where you go, which team you work in, you're gonna see slight difference, but it'll be similar format. There will be stand-ups and all of that. There will be meetings, but you'll see the different. There will be slightly different processes in place for Agile because they can adjust to the team and what they need, right? So just keep in mind, it is totally flexible. With that said, guys, expect the homework, and I hope this helped, and we will see you guys on Saturday.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you. Good night.